Good afternoon. This is Justice for All. I'm George Yates. It's a little bit after 2 o'clock, and we're here on WHKT, K-Talk Radio, 1650 AM. We're here in beautiful downtown Portsmouth, Virginia, on another lovely day. Also, it was raining on the way into the studio today, so hopefully it'll clear up a little bit. What was that I just heard on the CBS News that Paul McCartney's giving up pot now? He's like 70 years old. Well, he's 71, and he's finally now given up weed for his kids. Hasn't he already had kids all these years? I mean, what, now he's got little kids? He's 70. Oh, it's too much. I read this book. I think Neil Young's got his autobiography out too, and he was like in his 70 or whatever, and he decided to quit smoking pot too. You wonder how long it's going to last. So if you've been doing it that many years, that's too funny. He's finally giving up pot. Anyway, so lots of stuff in the news today. I like to listen to a guy on a podcast. His name is Dan Carlin, and he talks a little bit about this issue that we're going to talk about next hour. It's this trade bill that's in the news. It's called it's this fast track trade bill, and Barack Obama wants it, and it's the next NAFTA treaty. And NAFTA was a nightmare for American workers. And here we want to pass this new bill that's going to give the president the ability to fast track trade negotiation abilities, and the fascinating thing about this trade bill is nobody knows what's in it. It's like, the president says, pass this trade bill and give me the negotiating authority to do all these great things that it's going to help trade and help the country and all that. But the fact is that a lot of what is in this bill is a secret. And so we've got a guest with us today, Gaius Publius. He's on the air with us. How you doing, Gaius?
I'm doing great. How are you? And
I'm fine. And you're an expert on this thing, I take it. I've been kind of following it a little bit in the news, not really knowing what's going on with it. I know Elizabeth Warren is opposed to this bill, but of course she's demonized by most of the media as this wacko liberal. But she seems to be the only one that's honest and isn't in the pocket of the banks and the corporations in the country. So what's the story on this fast track trade bill?
Well, thank you for asking. It's not that hard to understand. By the way, about Warren being opposed, do you know that 87% of Republicans are opposed to the next trade bill also, because they know what the next NAFTA is going to do to them?
Well, so how in the world is it? But it's going to pass, isn't it? I mean, it looks like it's on its way. Who's in favor of it? How is this thing going to pass when nobody even knows what's in it?
All the money in the world. Simple answer. All the money in the world, all the money in the country is in favor of it. And as you know, I'm sure you know, that's what buys a law when it comes to Congress.
But I thought that the president was a man of the people, and I thought that Republicans were the party of the money. How come 87% of Republicans? I thought they were the big money party, not the Democrats.
Well, thank you for throwing me that easy lob over the plate, George.
I'm going to do it all day.
So obviously, the world the political world in the United States is often painted as the left versus the right, and I think it's to the benefit of all of the insiders to have that sort of pseudo fight going on.
Right.
But in fact, everything that really matters, I've been arguing for years that there's no real gridlock in Washington. When all of the money in the world or the money in the country wants something, that's generally what they get. When they want to water down Dodd-Frank, for example, and open up the door to more derivatives regulations, that's what they get. And they got a bipartisan vote on that last December. The Republicans and Democrats agreed on that one. You really have to look at the horizontal divide, the rich and the rest, as I've been calling it, to see the real action in the country. And TPP is a really good example of the battle between what most people want and what the big people who run the country for themselves and their rich friends want. I hate to sound so cartoonish, but it is almost a cartoonish world. It's difficult to come up with non-cartoonish explanations. You asked earlier about what TPP actually was. Did you want to go into that?
Yeah, let's define what it is first of all, so we know really what we're talking about.
Okay, so there's two things that people are hearing about. TPP, which is the trade deal itself, which is a secret, and the fast-track legislation that's going through Congress, which is the law that says once you pass fast-track and I, the president, introduce any trade bill, doesn't mean just TPP, but any trade bill, Congress's hands are tied. Congress, for the next 3 years, renewable for another 3 years, so presumably for the next 6 years, any trade bill that comes before Congress gets a simple majority vote in the House, a simple majority vote in the Senate, notice no filibuster. No amendments can be offered in either chamber against the bill. It's a straight up or down, and the number of minutes of debate is limited to what one congressman calculated as in the House, like 56 seconds per member. So that's what fast track does. It gives, if you can count, as I know everybody listening can, 6 years is out of the term of Barack Obama and into the term of the next president. Who's that next president going to be? Where fast track gives fast track authority to all trade bills to any president for the next 6 years. That could be Hillary Clinton, that could be Scott Walker, that could be Rand Paul, that could be anybody. But it's an enormous amount of power to give to not only the current president, no matter what you think of him, but the next president as well, no matter what you think of him or her.
What I love is you're talking about. I get a big kick out of the fact that I was just on the way in here and I'm listening to the 790, the other radio station for a little bit, and they love to talk. They love to trash Obama, as if he's some wild-eyed liberal. When in fact Obama is in favor of this trade bill. Obama's in the pocket of the corporations. Obama was bought and paid for by Wall Street before he was even president in 2008. From some of my reading of the pre-election things that he did in 2008, and he gets elected president, and he brings in the same people that took us to the recession. He brought in Summers and all these, and Geithner and all these other folks that were part of the meltdown in 2008. So how in the world, I agree with you when you say this is, they try to make this left versus right, but when in fact, the Democrats are Obama's been bought and paid for by the moneyed interest, clearly. What's going on here? Why would Obama be in favor of this?
Well, so I don't know. Most of us follow one side more than the other. I don't necessarily mean agree with one side, but follow the news on one side or the other. I tend to follow the news on the Democratic side. I think other people follow the news on the Republican side on balance, and that's okay. I mean, either one is okay. On the Democratic side, the Democratic Party of FDR, with strong labor unions and strong middle-class wages and strong pensions, and that policy continuing into the Lyndon Johnson era with the Great Society. I know a lot of people disagree with a lot of the poverty programs of the Great Society, but the fact is the Great Society continued the FDR democratic revolution, and in FDR's era, that was a revolution. That started to get eroded under Jimmy Carter, who was the beginning of the process of deregulation. It went on steroids under Ronald Reagan, and from Reagan until today, we have been ruled by nothing but kind of old-style liberals, pre-FDR liberals, not the social liberals of the FDR era, but what they're calling today neoliberals, because they look back to the liberalism of government should get out of the way of money. And Bill Clinton helped found the Democratic Leadership Society, the DLC, which is no longer in existence, but Clinton's idea, Al Gore's idea, Al Fromm's idea back in the 90s was to put Democrats back in the game by building alliances to business and alliances to money and kind of letting go of their allegiance to strong unions and strong middle-class wages. For example, it was Bill Clinton, as you know, in the 92 campaign who was pushing for NAFTA. And what did Ross Perot say? You're going to hear a giant sucking sound. Well, you heard the giant sucking sound. Clinton and all of the pro-NAFTA people said, we're going to get millions of jobs from these treaties, and we're going to increase our balance of trade payments. That is, we're going to export more than we import. We ended up importing more than we export by a lot. NAFTA caused a huge jump in the trade deficit. If you see those graphs, you see it's like an elephant was swallowed by a snake, the trade deficit under NAFTA. And you saw jobs disappear. And every Democrat who is approved by mainstream Democrats and every Republican who is approved by mainstream Republicans has been in favor of the policies that benefit the wealthy who support both parties. That's why I say I kind of look at the divide between the rich and the rest rather than the divide between the left and the right, which is basically a sideshow.
Well, the corruption is just there. It's just they do it in such a way that they can't get arrested for bribery. It's a quid pro quo, I guess, from the lobbyists. If you've just joined us, we're with Gaius Publius, who is what's your website? How do people read what you write, Publius, Mr. Publius?
Well, thank you for asking. I write in so many places. I write at political sites and economic sites like Down with Tyranny. I write at Naked Capitalism. I write at Digby's Hullabaloo. I write at Alternet. The best place to find my collected writing is at my Tumblr site, Gaius Publius, Gaius Publius.tumblr.com. And I keep that updated with a kind of an archive of tagged lists of, for example, you go to the tag for TPP and you can see my writing on TPP. I'm a Bernie Saunders candidate for the reasons that ought to be obvious based on what I've said, or candidate. He's my candidate, and I'm starting to write about Sanders. I'm starting to write about corruption between the rich and the rest and so forth. So, guys.tumblr.com.
Well, now Sanders is a socialist, so isn't that just, I mean, how in the world is that good for the country, socialism? Nobody really thinks that's good for the country, do they?
Well, you know, socialist, you can paint socialist and say communist or code for communist. But you can also paint socialist and say, this is what they have in Denmark, this is what they have in Sweden, this is what they have in Norway. I mean, those countries are not sinking beneath the waves. Those countries are people who have what FDR gave the country. That's a kind of socialism, too. In Europe, it's called democratic socialists or social democrats. And that's the kind of, as Bernie Saunders has said, that's the kind of socialist he is. He wants what FDR wanted for the country. He's a classic FDR liberal. And the word for that in Europe is democratic socialist. And he will specifically point to Denmark and say, look at what Denmark has. This is what we should have. This is what we used to have. We can strengthen it. This is what we should have.
But
people should not have to look at reverse mortgages to retire.
Well, I agree with that, and we certainly are seeing a lot of problems with the lower and the middle class. So the question is, how do we reduce income inequality without just taxing our way to it? I mean, what doesn't Bernie Sanders favor 80, 90% tax on the wealthy? What kind of tax rates would we have if Bernie Sanders is president?
Well, that's a really good question, George. So if you don't mind, unless you have to go to break, we can unpackage that now, or we can unpackage it after your break.
Okay, well, we're not gonna go to a break, but since we've moved on in this, we're talking about, first of all, before we get back to Bernie Sanders, we're talking about this TPP, which stands for what again?
Trans-Pacific Partnership.
So we got a Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's this new trade bill, and it hasn't passed yet, right?
The treaty hasn't been negotiated in its final form. It's a treaty being negotiated. So NAFTA was CAFTA was three countries, right? Canada and the United States. NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, was Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Trans-Pacific Partnership is U.S., Canada, Mexico, I think Peru, because they're bordering on the Pacific, and then something like 9 Asian countries, including Malaysia, which is human trafficking central for Asia, by the way, Brunei, which is a very repressive Muslim regime. Sharia law operates in Brunei. Also Japan, doesn't include China, but Vietnam, where where China has a lot of subsidiaries, just like BMW has subsidiaries in the U.S. China has subsidiaries in places like Vietnam. So China is kind of grandfathered through its Vietnam subsidiaries. Vietnam is also where the bulk of the Nike apparel gets made and so forth, so it's those countries. Japan is the big one, Korea is the big one, but we have a free trade agreement also with Korea separately. And then all of these small countries, including, I think, Australia and New Zealand as well. So 12 countries around the Pacific, yes.
Well, isn't what's good for the banks and what's good for corporate America ultimately good for America? I mean, we've got if the banks are making money and the corporations are making money, then ultimately they'll be employing people and the economy is moving. And so, what is wrong with free trade? I guess because I asked this question from the standpoint, you apparently say that NAFTA was not a success, right? NAFTA was not what it was sold as, and so what is the benefit of this trade bill according to the people that are in favor of it? How is Obama selling it?
Well, if you think of the state of the country, the Dow Jones is high. That means the 1% of the country, or the 0.5% of the country that actually invests in the Dow Jones seriously, is doing well. But if you look around, I think everybody knows that the only people that are making money are the professional class, people who are employed in high-tech companies, doctors and lawyers and so forth. But if you get below that top quintile, the top 20% of the country, where there really is trickle down, the wealth inequality, the split between that top 20% and everybody else is widening. And this is not eyeballing it. This is actual statistics. We've been doing this since 1980. The wage gap and the income gap and the wealth gap is just widening rapidly in this country. And I think everybody who's affected by it knows that. So is what's good for Wall Street good for the country? I don't think so. I mean, if you put another $20 million in David Koch's pocket or Jamie Dimon's pocket or Rex Tillerson, who's head of Exxon's pocket, does that mean that you're less likely to need, as I said, a reverse mortgage to retire? If you put somebody in office who thinks the way, this is Obama, and this is John Boehner, and this is David Koch, and this is Bill Clinton, if you think shrinking the Social Security benefits is a way to make the country wealthier so that you don't have to raise taxes on the wealthy, that helps the country, I think that's an illusion, and it kind of collides against the fact of what people are seeing in front of them. People are who are about to retire. We're about to get a poverty generation that's now in its 50s, because the average American has about $10,000 in the bank. And I think all of the listeners can kind of think about their own situation. Now imagine 10 years, and then they have to retire on their pension, their Social Security, if they have one, the amount in their 401k, and whatever money they've got stashed away in their bank in their home. Can you do that? Most people can't. We've got a wave of poverty that's about to hit this country. Well, how do you deal with that? How does a humane country deal with that? Well, Bernie Saunders, for example, will say, yeah, let's strengthen Social Security by raising the salary cap. In other words, if you earn under $100,000, you pay full Social Security tax on all of that money. If you earn $1 million, you pay full Social Security on the first $118,000, some number like that, and everything else gets a pass. You don't have to pay Social Security on that. Well, that's something unique to the tax law about Social Security. Let's just remove that cap. It's called scrap the cap. All of a sudden, Social Security has money not only to finance itself, but to increase benefits, not decrease them. Now, everybody in the audience should ask themselves, if you could tax the people that have gotten an enormous benefit from the wealth that's come into this country, just them, not you, just them, and increase Social Security, would that be a good thing for you? And would that be a good thing for the country to have people like you not falling into poverty?
But aren't you really penalizing people for being successful? Isn't that the argument against it? You've got somebody that, and when you talk about Sweden, isn't there a certain sameness to that society that's kind of boring? I mean, the fact is that everybody's blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and they all make the same amount of money, and there's really not a lot of doesn't that create issues for them when you can't, nobody can really go out and make a fortune because they know they're going to have to give back 90% of it to the government. I mean, what's the benefit and the value of having these draconian tax rates? We talked about Bernie Sanders. What would a tax rate under a Bernie Sanders presidency be in order to get this income redistribution that you're talking about?
Well, let's not talk about Sanders' tax rate because I don't know that he's made a formal proposal, but I know he's been asked about the Eisenhower-era tax rates. So let's make sure that people are clear about that. I know, George, you're certainly clear. I mean, you're a lawyer yourself, as I understand it.
Right.
I know you get this stuff. So when we talk about 90% tax rates on the wealthy, we're not talking about 90% tax on all of their income. We're talking about 90% tax on only the top slice. So, for example, there are tiers. Excuse me just a moment. I'm going to hit that cough button and clear my throat. Thank you. There are tiers, TIERS, or layers. The first, I'm going to guess at the numbers.
You're talking marginal tax rate. So
absolutely. And that's a term that most people don't get. So if you don't mind, let me just walk through what that means. For everybody in the country, the first, say, $10,000 is not taxed. For everybody in the country, the next, say, $10,000 is taxed at, I'm going to guess, 9% or 10%. Maybe it's 15%. For everybody in the country, the next $20,000 is taxed at, say, 20%. If you only make $30,000, the most you'll ever pay in taxes is 20%. That's before deductions. For everybody in the country up to, I think it's $35,000, that next layer is taxed at 33% or something like that. That's the top tax rate in this country, and it only applies to the number between, say, 20 and 33,000. What we had under Eisenhower was a couple of more tiers after that, so that under Eisenhower, if you earned the equivalent in today's dollars of $30,000, you paid today's rate of, say, 30%. But if you earned $100,000, that extra 70 maybe got picked up at a 50% rate. If you earned from 100,000 to $1 million, maybe it was a 60% rate, but only on that last set of dollars. If you earned $1 million, now you get into that 90% tax rate, which, by the way, was the national tax rate between Roosevelt and Kennedy. The top marginal tax rate was at 91, 92, 93%. But that's only on the last dollar. Now, let's look at what that does. If I'm a CEO of a company and I make, let's say, $1 million, and my tax rate on that $1 million today is 30% or 15%. It depends upon the way I'm doing it. Let's say I want to strip that company of $1 million by negotiating another round of bonuses because, hey, I'm the CEO. In order to get $1 million in my pocket out of that company, all I have to do is skim that company for $1.3 million. The 3 goes to taxes, and I get $1 million. But what if for that last $1 million, I'm paying 90% taxes? Now, all of a sudden, if I want to skim an extra $1 million for that company, I got to strip it of $10 million so that I can put $9 million to taxes to get $1 million. No company is going to let me strip a corporation for $10 million so that I can pocket $1 million. And no CEO is going to do that. What was happening in the 1950s is that the profits of the corporation were being plowed back into the corporation. Today, the profits of the corporation are being skimmed as fast as they can. And believe me, in my real life, I have a view of these things. I mean, I can watch these companies, and I watch CEO compensations, I watch their compensation committees, and I know exactly what they do. They put each other on each other's compensation committees, and then they vote each other's CEO-level salaries. So you've got a company that is making $100 million profit, the CEO gets $23 million. Next year, they lose $5 million. the CEO gets another $23 million compensation. Why? Because you can't lose once you get in the CEO class. Carly Fiorina tanked HP when she was president of HP, CEO of HP, and they still paid her millions to walk out the door. You can't lose when you're in that because there's no taxes to keep you from stripping your companies.
So this is an interesting phenomenon, this thing, and you talk about that in your piece, Down with Tyranny, don't you? You talk about stripping this policy that people that companies do in order to avoid taxes.
Corporations loot the economy, and CEOs loot, CEO class loot corporations, and that's why we're getting a huge inequality gap between the average worker, a plumber, a person who installs drywall, a person who cleans windows, a person who does maintenance on your home, a person who installs tile, and that kind of person, and a person who walks into an office and forgive me, George, bills $250 an hour in 10-minute increments. I don't resent that person. That person doesn't control the country. The person who controls the country is the person who makes $50 million because he runs a hedge fund. That person can get Obama's chief of staff on the phone.
Right.
That's the person who runs the company. I don't resent what you make. I don't resent what I make or anybody else makes. But I resent what David Koch makes and the chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank makes, because they have a license to print money, and they have a license to call up their Congress people and say, here's the next law I want, and here's the money it's going to take for me to buy it. Those people run the country.
We're going to take a short break here. When we come back, I want you to frame for us the issues, how Bernie Sanders, who probably can't get the nomination from Hillary Clinton, but how Bernie Sanders' debate with Hillary might at least move the country into a direction more in keeping with what you're trying to accomplish with some of these problems we've got with income inequality, because that's all he's talking about. He's not talking about racial equality or gay marriage or anything else. That's all he's talking about is what you're talking about right now, this income inequality. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back with Gaius Publius. We'll be right back.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl design shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storeenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Hi, this is Greg Picaveras. Join me for Sports Scene each Wednesday from noon to 1 right here on News Talk 1650 WHKT. You can also hear the show on TuneIn as well. We will talk to local, regional, and nationally acclaimed sports guests, and we'll interact with our audience as well at Greg Pick on Twitter. Sports Scene, Wednesdays from noon to 1 right here on 1650 AM.
Denby Baptist Christian School is now enrolling students for the upcoming 2015-2016 school year. Denby Baptist Christian School offers a quality Christian education for students in kindergarten through the 12th grade and an early learning center for preschool children ages 2.5 to 4. DBCS is a ministry of Denby Baptist Church located in the Oyster Point section of Newport News, offering education marked by a biblical worldview, academic excellence, extracurricular activities, and a affordability. Denby Baptist Christian School offers daily Bible classes and a weekly chapel service. Call and schedule your tour at Denby Baptist Christian School, 13010 Mitchell Point Road, Newport News. Call 757-249-2654. The mission of Denby Baptist Christian School is to educate the mind, nurture the soul, and shape the character of each student in a Christ-centered environment based on the truth of God's Word. Online at dbcs.org and dbcs-kids.org.
Okay, we're back for the next 15 or 20 minutes or so with Gaius Publius, and we're talking about Bernie Sanders' candidacy for president. And it just seems to me that, the word socialism in this country is just political death. I mean, Bernie Sanders is an independent from Vermont, he's a socialist, but he's been voting as an independent and really with the Democrats for years. How in the world can anybody that's a self-styled socialist get any traction in America in the politics?
Well, I think that answer number one.
I mean, the label itself is just isn't it the label socialism? Just, as you say, people equate that with communism, and you're just done. I mean, there's just no way. We're a capitalist country, even though we are really more of a democratic socialist country than people want to admit. But we call ourselves a capitalist society because we are way more right-wing capitalist than the European economies are. And as soon as you start talking about socialism, then all you got to do to defeat somebody like Bernie Sanders is say, yeah, he wants us to be like Europe, and then we'll all run from it.
Well, let's play that out over a timeline, because this is not going to happen all at once. These are great questions, by the way. First of all, he's running. There's a group in the Democratic Party who believes as he does, and they're not in control of the party. The party is kind of using them to paint itself as more populist than it is. Chuck Schumer, for example, is not a populist, but he's the next majority leader of the Senate. Somebody like, you mentioned, Elizabeth Warren is a populist. Bernie Sanders is a populist. Sherrod Brown in Ohio is a populist. People like Jeff Merkley in Oregon are populists. But
when you say what is a populist? Somebody that's not in the pocket of the banks and the corporations, someone that's actually not corrupted by the money. What is a populist?
I think that's that's a great definition, because the social issues, the gay marriage issue, the immigration issue, those kinds of social issues are ways in which mainstream Democrats say, I'm different from Republicans because of this. And it's gay marriage, it's immigration status, it's this and that. But in fact, the mainstream Democrats are not in sync with the American people on economic issues. If you ask the most right-wing person listening to this radio show, what did you think of the bank bailouts? I'm willing to bet that you and I could hear the screaming through our headsets.
Oh yeah, they
hate the bank bailouts. Yeah, on the left, people like Sherrod Brown and Jeff Merkley and Bernie Sanders, they hated the bank bailouts as well. On economic issues, this is not a right-wing country. Poll after poll, if you separate the policies from the candidates or the policies from the party and ask people, would you like your pension to be better? Would you oppose another handout to the banks? Would you be in favor of raising that salary cap on Social Security? More than half of the country of both parties will say yes. As I said earlier, 87% of Republicans want TPP, the trade agreement, to fail because everybody in the country knows NAFTA was put the country in the tank.
So when you say 87% of Republicans, you mean 80% of Republicans in the country and not 87% of Republicans in the Congress.
You're exactly right, okay. Because what's in Congress, by and large, represents the people, the money that put them there. Not entirely. Mm-hmm. But by and large,
and yet,
what's in the country is the people who have to suffer under policies that the rich people have put into place to benefit themselves.
Which begs the question then, how in the world is it if we've got this country that has political leanings that are somewhat center-left, that we end up with a center-right Congress or a right-wing Congress. And, in fact, we're seeing this more and more where the people really aren't being represented by what their Congress does. Congress has a 10% approval rate, yet we keep returning them to office. The system has been corrupted, I guess, completely, even from the standpoint of who runs, who gets elected, and they're really not voting for the people's interests.
Yeah, and I think that you could point to two things as well, two other things as well. I agree with what you say, George. The one thing you can point to is these social issues, because they tend to be flags for I'm on the blue team, I'm on the red team. You know, the red team always says go, and the blue team always says onward. And if you say onward, we don't like you. If you say go, we do. You know, so you've got these things where you could. So here's a kind of a story. I'll say this about the unions, but they used to say it about the races. You've got a union worker, a non-union worker, and a rich man sitting at a table, and somebody puts a dozen donuts on that table. The rich guy scoops 11 donuts over onto his side, leaves one, turns to the non-union guy and says, that union guy's looking at your donut, you know. Now, they used to say that about the races. The fact is, the reason that the pre-Civil War aristocracy in the South kept all the land after the Civil War was because they got the white sharecroppers who were poor to hate the black sharecroppers who were poor. And they made the South about that battle and not the battle between the aristocracy before is the aristocracy after. Meet the new master, same as the old master. And that game works. So, but it's a distraction, because what do these people? What do the people who are running us care about? They care about power and money. They don't care about these social issues. They probably agree on the social issues. Well, they're just using them to divide us and to get us to not see that jointly they are the enemy.
Right, right. Something you raised, I think it was Simon Johnson, raises an interesting issue that when we see all of the money coming into the Clinton Foundation and how much money Bill Clinton makes making a speech, $125,000 to $500,000 for a 1-hour speech. It's really ridiculous. And here we have Barack Obama, who I would guess is setting himself up for a rather lucrative career speech making. And there's a kind of a connection, it seems, that they're drawing where if you're a politician like Obama or Clinton or even one of these senators, and they then are moving away from the political arena and out into the private world, they have to. They're setting themselves up for a lucrative career after political office. So is that what Obama is doing by right now by embracing this new TPP Act?
Well, I wrote a piece about TPP on Friday at Down with Tyranny. That's downwithtyranny.blogspot.com. Look for it. Look for the piece on TPP and the Straits of Malacca. What's going on with TPP has a military aspect, too. So I think there are multiple explanations for what Obama's doing with TPP. I think that that's one of them. I really do think he's setting himself up for a Bill Clinton future. But, you know, it's not just the president. Almost every congressman who leaves office, like Mary Landrieu, for example, in Louisiana, a very right-wing Democrat, pro-oil Democrat.
She just lost.
And they're just lost, and their top staffers, guess where they end up? They end up in K Street law firms and lobbying firms with huge salaries and retainers.
Yeah, I wonder how much money Eric Cantor is making right now. He just lost his last race. Hey, like Burr Rabbit, don't throw him in the briar patch. I mean, you lose a job where you're making $150,000, and I'm sure he's making well over $1 million as a lobbyist right now. Of
course, and he's all of these people secure that future by their votes in the present.
Denny Haster is in the news today. How in the world was he coming up with $3.5 million to pay somebody off for how much money was he making in the last 10, 15 years since he left the speakership? It's a revolving door where they don't really make their money as politicians. They make their money after they leave office. And as what do you say in there? It says speaking fee money isn't just money; it's easy money. You go make you make $500,000 for an hour speech. and that all that money that's kind of corrupting to Hillary Clinton, isn't it? That foundation money, how much is that going to be tied to her coming in this next election?
Well, I think now I'm speaking from the Democratic standpoint, and I'm not a Democrat, but I obviously lean left. But I don't lean left in that Democratic Party sense. I lean left in that let's get money in the hands of the people sense. So
right.
I think people get that, what I'm saying. But from a Democratic standpoint, I think, so let's go back to what we were started to talk about earlier about how this plays out. Sanders doesn't have to convince Republicans in the first round. Sanders has to convince Democrats in the first round, many of whom agree with him. There was a big push in the Democratic Party to have Elizabeth Warren run. Sanders is carrying that message and has been for like 20 years. Warren is saying the same thing today that Sanders is saying, and they're kind of tag teaming, I think. I think we're starting to see a Warren-Sanders tag team. I think Sanders can make a run at Clinton and beat her. My approach to that is let's have the primary and let the voters decide. So let's say he does beat her. Now what happens? You've got Sanders. People have been watching these debates with Hillary Clinton. People hear the tag socialist, but they listen to his message, and he's very, very good with his message. He's very clear. All of a sudden, people are saying, that sounds about right. I think that and I look at the Republican candidates, I don't see somebody with a lot of what we used to call presidential timber or gravitas over there. For example, George H.W. Bush had a distinguished career, whatever you think of him. And you could put him up, you could put Bob Dole up and say, yeah, that's kind of a serious politician. But if you put up Rick Santorum, I know he's got his favorites, or Rick Perry. I don't think Perry has entered the race this time, but he was last time.
He'll be in it.
You put up people like that, and they've got their fans, and that's great. But I think there's so many people who won't take them seriously in a general election that you're kind of all of a sudden, could Sanders, with that message being that effective, and the fact is that he's not saying it because he wants to get elected. He's been saying it for 20 years. This is not Barack Obama, who in 2006 was telling Robert Rubin in a room that was taped, by the way, code for we need to fix Social Security. And then in 2008 he said, let's raise the salary cap. And then in 2009 he says, screw the salary cap, let's cut benefits. I mean, that's a guy who lied for the purposes of the election. You're not going to get that with Bernie Sanders. So people are going to have to decide on the merits. Do I want this message in the White House, or do I want another person who represents money in the White House? Now let's put Hillary Clinton against a Republican. I think as strong as she seems to be, she could lose. And I think she could lose precisely because people are going to say, on the Democratic side, oh my God, another person with huge ties to money. This is like Bill Clinton's fifth term.
It really is.
We really want that. And Democrats are going to say, to a certain percentage, not really. I know a lot of Democrats who will not lift a finger for Hillary Clinton, and it's not because of her age, it's not because of her gender, it's because she is deeply embedded with money the same way Obama is, the same way Romney was, the same way almost everybody on the Republican side who's backed by David Koch or Sheldon Adelstein will be.
The Republicans,
Marco Rubio
the
is
Republicans.
Sheldon Adelstein.
I think the Republicans ought to run a blue-collar Republican, somebody that's not rich, someone who doesn't have a lot of money, a Scott Walker or a John Kasich or one of those guys, or even a Marco Rubio. Of course, he's paid for by some billionaire in Florida. I think he's got a negative net worth. But you run one of these blue-collar guys that says, I don't really have any money, and they could beat Hillary Clinton just because they'll identify they're more of an everyman than Hillary Clinton could ever hope to be.
Well, I think that's a good idea. I think that it's probably, so you mentioned Scott Walker. I hate to say to Scott Walker fans, but he is David Koch's secret candidate.
Yeah.
Scott Walker was backed hugely by Koch money in Wisconsin. Dave, if you look up Scott Walker and Americans for Prosperity, which is a Koch operation, Scott Walker is a David Koch candidate. He is a man of the people in the same way that Mitt Romney's a man of the people if he puts on a work shirt.
Well, you know, we probably need to end it there, Gaius. Is there anything you'd like to talk in the next minute that you'd like to talk about that we haven't had a chance to discuss in the last hour? We've got to run to the CBS News break here.
I think everybody who has a Republican House of Representatives representative in the next 2 weeks needs to call that representative's office and say, do not give more power to the president. Vote no on fast track. That's the next big fight, and it's coming soon.
And the 1 minute we also have left, why in the world have they kept it secret? What is in this bill that we don't know? Why can't they let people know what's in the bill? Why is it secret?
Because it's poison. You can't show that stuff to people and say support it. It's poison. The 3 chapters that have been leaked from it are terrible, just terrible stuff.
But is that normal when you've got a bill that's this important? Don't people have the right to know what's in it so they can call their congressman and say why they're opposed to it?
Having the right and getting the right are 2 separate things. Actually, I'll go back to George W. Bush. He put a bill through Congress, and he showed the draft of the treaty before he asked for fast track status. So yes, this is unusual. This stuff is toxic. It's why everybody in the country doesn't want it.
Well, that's really great to hear. Listen, we've spent the last hour or so with Gaius Publius. He's a very intelligent, very well educated fellow on this. It's really been a pleasure talking with you today.
I love talking with you too, George, and I like talking to audiences like yours. These are good conversations.
Great. Well, we hope to have you back on the show.
Thank you very much. All
right, great. Have a great day.
You too.
And so that wraps up this section of our show today. We're gonna have we got Mr. Fletcher on the air? Well, hey, Joey, are you there?
Hey, Joey Fletcher here.
All right, I've got Joey Fletcher on the line here for the next few minutes. He's the general manager of Bayside Harley Davidson. Where are you all located over there, Joey?
We're over here, 2211 Frederick Boulevard, 1 mile on the Portsmouth side of the tunnel. You can't miss us. The iconic Bayside Harley Davidson Tower lets you know how far you backed up from the tunnel when you're going east.
Hey, I noticed the other day I was going to try to drop by there, and it's hard to get off at that Frederick Boulevard. What's going on when you're headed eastbound? Is there an issue getting off to see you guys, or what's the best way of getting down there?
It's real easy. I'm glad you asked. What you do is you get off at the Portsmouth Boulevard exit, 1 exit prior. The Frederick Boulevard exit is temporarily closed. We're getting a brand new off-ramp and on-ramp with the new project going on here in Hampton Road. So you get off at Portsmouth Boulevard, just come down to Frederick and take a left, and we'll be right on your right. So it's no issue whatsoever.
If you've just joined us, this is Justice for All. I'm George Yates, and I'm here with my good friend Joey Fletcher, who's the manager of this awesome, my band played over there a couple of weeks back, and I guess we're promoting another little meet and greet on Father's Day. Is that what we're talking about today?
Yeah. Typically I send overaged bikes to auction, and instead of doing that, I want to offer to the general public an opportunity to buy these units at wholesale price so that someone can have a chance to get something really inexpensively. And of course, business-wise, it makes great sense because I get a new customer, and of course, I've got the bike rolling here in Hampton Roads. So it's a real family organization. I initiated that last weekend, and we're going to keep doing it. The next event is going to be on Father's Day weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. Feel free to come on down. We'll have live music, food, and even some adult beverages. So, and then Jorge and Amigos will be playing on Sunday, Father's Day Sunday, and we'll also have other live music on Saturday. So it's a great event. It works well for everybody, and the thing that is most enjoyable is everybody just has fun. It was a fun event. It's gonna be the place to be on that mid-weekend of every month.
So, but you're open right now, so if someone's driving down the road and they want to get themselves a new Harley, they need to go by Bayside Harley Davidson, which is right there, right off. You can see it as you're going either way, west or east bound, just on the west side of the Portsmouth Tunnel. and you look over there and you can see that tower, Bayside Harley-Davidson, and boy, you got a nice inventory of motorcycles over there. It's an unbelievable showroom. Blew my mind. Hey, and I got my Harley-Davidson T-shirt when my band played there a couple of weeks back. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, mandatory.
So you've got these bikes. Do you have these auction bikes available now, or is that just on this special weekends?
Yeah, I identify about 50 bikes on average this time of year for auction, and we have them for sale 30 days prior to actually shipping them off.
What kind of price range have we got on these bikes?
I've got bikes from $2,000 on up.
You can go get yourself a Harley-Davidson for $2,000?
It can happen. Now, a $2,000 Harley-Davidson might have some assembly required.
Okay.
But we make miracles happen every day.
I'm amazed. I was there talking. You've got guys in there that have 4, 5, 6, 7 motorcycles. They're motorcycle freaks. And
yeah.
How many motorcycles do you have in inventory right now sitting on your showroom floor?
Typically around 200 combination new and used. There's over 100 on the floor alone, plus my warehouse and other storage areas on the facility.
And what is it about a Harley-Davidson that makes it the bike that? I mean, why is it that it's such an iconic motorcycle?
Well, it's not even just the bike. Harley-Davidson is a lifestyle. Everything about Harley-Davidsons is Americana to the core. It's an American product. It's assembled in America. It's built in America by Americans. And now it is a modern, high-tech vehicle. You look at a Harley-Davidson, and it looks like a simple machine. However, it isn't. It's a very complex, well-designed, and technologically advanced machine that has hidden all the technology, and it still looks like a motorcycle. So Harley-Davidson is just... I was in the metric business, the Japanese business, for years, and I sold so many Harley lookalikes. And the reason that 9 out of 10 of them said they were buying that is because they couldn't afford a Harley. Everybody wants a Harley. And now Harleys are affordable. Harley-Davidson Finance and our local credit unions can stretch the payments and get low and no down payment. Harleys are extremely attainable these days.
So you got the Harley. You're saying that the modern top-of-the-line Harley of today looks like the retro Harley of the last generation, but it has all the bells and whistles. It's got all the technology of a new bike, but it's got the look of the old-fashioned bike. Is that what you're saying?
The look, the smell, the feel, you can even taste it.
And the sound. Doesn't Harley have a unique sound that people just have to have?
That Harley potato sound is unmatched. There's not another product in the world that can come close to it. You know it's a Harley when it comes up behind you. All
right. Well, we'll leave it at that. What's the address again over there, Bayside Harley-Davidson?
Yeah, it's 2211 Frederick Boulevard. If you have any trouble, just give us a call. It's 397-5550, and we'll get you here. 397-5550. Give a call over there. This is Joey Fletcher, the general manager of Bayside Harley. It's good talking to you, Joey. We'll come on out there. My band, Thumbs Up, will be playing there on June 21st from 12 to 3. So come hear us play and eat some hamburgers and some hot dogs, drink some beers, and maybe buy one of those bikes from auction. Absolutely. We'll have a great time. You don't have to buy a bike. Just come down and hang out.
All right. So we'll leave it at that. Good talking to you. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you in the next hour.
All right. You too, George. Talk to you soon.
Adios. So that wraps up the first hour here of Justice for All. I'm George Yates. We were here with Gaius Publius for the first 50 minutes or so, and spent the last 5 minutes there with Joey promoting that Bayside Harley-Davidson and promoting my band playing out there on June the 21st. We're looking forward to that, 12 to 3. We played out there 2 weeks ago and had a good time, had a nice turnout. So mark that on your calendar for Father's Day. Dads out there, or moms, or anybody listening, bring Dad out to the Harley-Davidson dealership on Father's Day. Maybe he'll pick up a bike at auction, and if not, get to hear the band play and have a beer or two and enjoy an outing. We'll be back in the next hour. We're going to be with Marcy Wheeler, and we're going to be talking about this Patriot Act that's about to expire and be passed by Congress. So we'll be right back with Marcy Wheeler in the next hour.